Welcome to Talking to Myself. I'm Carol L. Power, your host, and the author of Early Summer and Raleigh Peters and the Lumberjack Ghost. I plan to do only one podcast this month on mental health awareness, but then I bumped into Greg Renz, former firefighter turned author. We talked about post-traumatic stress disorder for first responders. His 2 books deal with PTSD, and I thought this would be a great topic for the show. Author Greg Renz was a firefighter for the city of Milwaukee for 28 years, retiring as captain. He rescued 2 boys from their burning basement bedroom. As a result, he received many honors for this heroic act, including induction into the Wisconsin Fire and Police Hall of Fame in 2006. Beneath the Flames, Renz's first book, inspired by his work as a firefighter, was published by Three Towers Press in 2019, and the sequel, Beyond the Flames, was released in 2024. Hello, Greg, and thank you for joining me on Talking to Myself.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure to be here. It's always fun to talk about writing.
Congratulations on making it as a finalist in the Midwest Independent Publishers Association.
Yeah, I received an email 2 mornings ago saying that they were going to announce the finalists last evening. So yeah, that's pretty exciting. Yeah, it's always nice to get some validation for your work. It's like we tend to I don't know, be pretty self-critical and always wonder. It's like, yeah, is our stuff really any good? So when you get some of these types of awards, it fuels you. You feel like, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to keep going.
All right, let's talk about mental health and mental health awareness. You and I chatted a couple weeks ago about your job as a firefighter and the amount of trauma that happens in any given day that firefighters and first responders must witness and cope with.
Those serious incidents, some days you don't get any, but you might get two or three, 4 major incidents where there's massive trauma or really a heart-wrenching situation. And especially as a fire officer, you're making split-second decisions with not always that much information and not always good information. And sometimes you make the wrong call. And this is where you have to live with it. And the part of it that weighs on you is that logically you can know that you did everything right in a tragic situation that didn't turn out. And this is where you made all the right decisions, did everything right, but yet it turned out terribly. And the emotional side of you will beat you up. And that's the monster of PTSD. It will not leave you alone for some people. And you'll have incidents that'll run in your head over and over and over. After I published my first book and went out on tour, we talked about that, and I had a lot of first responders coming up and thanking me for writing a book that showed what our job was really like, not the Hollywood version that you see where it's all excitement and running in and saving people and yes, oh, great things, but the tragedy we deal with on a regular basis and how it affects us emotionally and affects us on levels that people really would never understand unless you're part of that or you're involved in something like that. So I heard a lot of really, really tough stories where people who had read the book said, after thanking me, said, I've never even talked about this incident. Said I for the last 20 years, I haven't slept through the night once. I wake up with a cold sweat, my heart pounding. I'm reliving that incident over and over and over again. I can't get over it. And said, after reading your book, I thought, maybe I should really be talking about this. So I think that's the power of fiction is it kind of opens people's eyes. It makes them feel like they're not the only one dealing with something like this. Because, in the fire department, it's historically kind of a macho profession, and it's not something where we feel like we should be and we feel like we should be tough and be able to handle these tough situations.
Right.
We think it's, or at least in the past, felt like a weakness if it broke us down or we started feeling really bad about something. So yeah, in the firehouse, you would, especially with the old timers, early when I came on, and you would hear people say, "Hey, kid, toughen up, Jesus, you know, there's no, don't let this get to you. Don't let people see you cry. My God." So that was, that's the way it was then. And things have changed. Now you have departments that are actually addressing these situations. And when there's a traumatic incident, I know in the Milwaukee Fire Department, they shut down the companies that were involved. They all come together and they bring in like a psychologist or somebody experienced in diffusing situations like this to talk with the crews and basically lay out, what they might expect if they start having some issues with it. Because that's the thing, not everybody gets PTSD.
You said they bring in like psychiatrists or psychologists or whatever. But is that by case situation or are there because I think of PTSD as being sort of a long term, like some people actually need more than just that one or two meetings with, mental health professional.
Sure. So PTSD can actually affect you for one situation. But when we look at the fire department, you're looking at the cumulative effects over time of trauma after trauma after trauma. So basically, you might deal with all of these different traumas and they're kind of taking a little bite out of you a little at a time. And then for whatever reason, this one sets you off. So basically what these psychologists are saying that we have, if you start having issues, that we have an employee assistance program and that you need to contact this employee assistance program. So they're not really doing any therapy at these sessions, just kind of informing us that if this happens, what to expect after this, because some of the most traumatic incidents can really leave you shaken for a while. And
Mhm.
it's nice to be able to get together. And like I say, in the past, we would, go back to the firehouse and use dark humor to kind of diffuse, but that's
Mhm.
probably not the best way to do it. So
Right.
you get a psychologist coming in and just kind of going through, the different things that you might look for. And if you start feeling some of these things that are happening, to be aware of this. And then, of course, giving out the cards for the employee assistance that if you're feeling any of this, call the employee assistance because it's something that the department won't know why, and it's totally
Anonymous.
separate. Yeah, it's totally separate from the department, and nobody will ever know why you're going because, face it, if you if your fire department thinks you're going for psychiatric care, there's probably people that would say, yeah, you probably shouldn't be on this job. And, it's like you think about a lot of professions, airline pilots and stuff like that. There's people that are, can be dealing with PTSD. They need treatment, and it's like so some agencies with the wrong leadership might say, well, we can't have people here that can't handle the stress and can't handle the trauma. And it's like, no, we need people that are willing to go for help
Right.
because it's the people that don't go for help that are suffering that end up, really having issues, I guess is probably the best way to put
Right.
it.
Now, if you see someone, okay, so I mean, you're retired now, correct?
Right. Mhm.
But when you were working and you saw someone you thought was struggling, did you reach out to them or was, secretly or privately or how did that work?
Well, it's interesting because we hide it really well. And some of the suicides we've had on the job, you would have never known. I mean, at work, they were just personable and up and everything else. And then one day in the morning, you hear, oh, they swallowed a bullet last night. So
Oh,
it's kind of hard, but I think the best thing with that and what's come around too is that at the kid as an officer or anybody at the kitchen table, if you have an incident like that, even after it's diffused, to sit around and talk about it. And maybe
mhm.
somebody will start sharing something where it's like, yeah, you might want to, get some help with that. I know at one of my book talks, this when I got done, I saw this firefighter was walking toward me, and everybody was gone, and I could see the pain in his eyes. And as he approached me, could see that he was really disturbed. So he told me, he says, "Yeah, you know that stuff you're talking about trauma and PTSD and stuff. I'm dealing with that, and I don't know what to do about it." He said, "I'm afraid if I go for help, that my crew won't trust me anymore."
Mhm.
And he said, and so I said, "Well, I'm not a counselor or therapist, but sit down and let's talk. Tell me about it." And so he started sharing stories that he had never shared with anyone. They were pretty dark. And when he got done, I said, you know, you are dealing with some tough issues there. And, you know, it's like you really should get some help. And I shared a story about a friend that on the Milwaukee Fire Department who had gone through a tough childhood. He was in the Marines, and, you know, that can get kind of tough. And then on the fire department, the trauma you see and everything you go through. And he was spiraling. He was going, and he was lashing out at our patients and stuff on runs, and you know, hollering at people and stuff. And that's what happens with PTSD. You lose control of yourself at times. So a friend of his saw that he was struggling like this. And now this guy had a 9 millimeter gun in his dresser drawer. And every morning he looked at that dresser drawer and asked himself if today was the day. And he put the
Wow.
gun to his head 3 times, did not pull the trigger. And I think I know why. Because his friend, who was a peer counselor in the Milwaukee Fire Department, drug him out to Washington, D.C., and would not let him say no. I mean, drug him out into the airplane out to Washington, D.C., at a facility that does a lot of therapy for first responders. And thank goodness that he bounced back from that. And now he gives talks that really I mean, they shatter you to listen to his stories. So, you
Right.
know, I told this firefighter about this friend of mine, and how he came close to suicide, got help, and he was doing good. And so this firefighter who came up to me at the book talk, when I got done, he said, "Yeah, you know what?" He said, I was pretty sure I needed to go for help. I probably knew that, but I needed somebody like you to tell me that I should." I
Yeah.
thought, okay, there's the power of fiction again. Through a
Right.
fictional story, you know, it
Right.
moves
So
somebody.
tell me about your two books, just a little bit, and
Sure.
that whole piece on the PTSD. How did that work?
Right.
So,
And I should mention, I don't like the term PTSD. I like to call
okay.
it PTSI because
So
it's
you were saying that at the
yes, because it's an injury to the
conference,
brain.
and that's why
Yeah,
I was confused. So it's
it,
called
yeah,
what?
it's not a disorder, it's an injury to the brain.
So
So,
it's
you know, so it post-traumatic
PTSI.
stress injury instead of
Okay.
post-traumatic stress
Okay.
disorder.
No.
Because,
Okay.
you know, if you have a broken arm, you don't call it a disorder. It's it's an injury. And I think you could say the same for a brain, because
Okay.
injury traumatizes you and injures the brain, and sometimes changes the brain chemistry, which I
Okay.
think it would be considered an injury. So anyway,
Yeah. Great. Thank
that's
you.
the way I look at it.
No,
So
that's good. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
That's
the
great.
my first book, Beneath the Flames, is a coming of age story, and that's a young man from rural Wisconsin who joins the Milwaukee Fire Department to prove he's not a coward and a loser. And of course, he's kind of full of self-hatred himself because of a horrific fire on the neighboring farm that he blames himself for the way it turned out. So he's suffering from PTSD from just that one incident, and an abusive father also. So he's got a lot of stuff going. So it's his journey to find peace. And as he's, you know, going through ups and downs, you know, how novels go, you give him a little good stuff and then you bring him down and then
Right.
give him something good. So it's an up and
Right.
down trip. People have just loved the characters to that first book.
Okay.
And over and over and over again, I get the same kind of reviews that, oh my gosh, I just love the characters. Miss Bernie's one of the most favorite characters, an older black lady who's like the mentor of my young man. So that's a coming of age story, and I wasn't going to write a sequel to that until I had all these people clamoring to go back and revisit Engine 15 in Milwaukee and the characters that I had in the first book. So I thought, all right, you know, I can do that. And what really made up my decision was I was on a podcast out in Texas with this author and a retired firefighter, and he had gone through some really tough PTSD. And we started talk books for a while, and then we talked firefighting and shared stories. He says, "Yeah, PTSD almost took my life." He said, there's another thing too. People say commit suicide. No, no, no. PTSD took your life. Suicide took your life. You did not commit anything. This is
Right,
an illness. It's not
right.
like you
They often
consciously.
tell you to say die, but he died by suicide.
Exactly, exactly. So
Right?
it's some terminology, but I got it when somebody corrected me, and I thought, that I think that is a better way to look at it.
Right,
So
right.
anyway, this guy was telling me about his issues with PTSD, and he also told me that his wife, after reading my first book, told him, she said, I finally understand what you've gone through. She had to read a book to understand the pain he was in and where that came from. So I thought, there again, the power of fiction, man, oh man, it could just in so many different ways, it can open
Right.
eyes and change minds. So he's telling me about this, and he said, thank goodness I came across this therapy called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprogramming. Now, I had never heard of that. And he said,
Hmm.
I went through psychoanalysis and that kind of helped. It took the edge off, but it didn't really help that much. But I could go on. Then my brother died and I spiraled. My marriage was falling apart. I was angry at everybody. I just couldn't hold it together. And then a friend said, "Hey, you got to check out this therapy at I think the University of Houston or something, where this was being done." And so he did. Went to see a therapist. He said, Greg, after a couple of weeks, the cloud started to lift, and that therapy saved my life. And that right there convinced me that I needed to write a novel to include that therapy as part of the story. So I started talking about that at book talks, and I couldn't tell you how many people came up and said, I use that therapy and it really does work. And it's really when you look it up and see it, it sounds kind of hokey. It's almost like being hypnotized in a way, but not really hypnotism. And it's like a reprogramming your brain and how you deal with the trauma it's settled in. And it's not like it erases the memories, but what it does, it takes the emotion out of those memories. So you still
Hmm.
remember those incidents, but you're not waking up in a cold sweat with your heart pounding, as you're reliving it. So you're not reliving it every time it hits your head. So the memories are still there, but it just takes the emotional edge off from it. So I thought, I got to look into this. And as I talked about it, this author friend of mine said, I have a friend down in New Orleans who was a therapist that uses that EMDR. So I got a hold of her and I said, do you think you could give me some guidance on, how I put this, what I do in my book, no, no, no. And she said, oh, I'd love to do that. So I researched it myself and I talked to her quite a bit about it. And then I sent her some scenes of my therapy sessions. Now I don't go deep into it. You just get a little taste of what it
Right.
is
But you
and
want
kind
it
of
to be correct, right?
yeah, I mean it's like you don't want to put in something where a therapist goes, that's dumb. That's not how that.
Totally wrong, right?
So, so I sent it to her, and she had a couple of things that she pointed out that, oh, yeah, you're pushing the limits on that. But she said, for the most part, and this was I guess it was after I did a lot of research. She says you really have a good feeling for what goes on in a therapy session, and she says I love some of the lines in your book that the therapist used on the firefighter, and I'm going to use them with some of my patients.
Well,
The second book is about a 56-year-old fire captain who was really dealing with some serious issues of PTSD.
mhm.
He was a Vietnam veteran Marine, so he had issues from that, and he had a really tough situation with his father. His father was abusive when he was a young man, and he was betrayed on the fire department. So he had all these things going, and he was kind of at the end of his rope as far as his life. And so I really wanted to explore where do you go when you're that hopeless? And that's what it is. It's hopelessness. It's just a crushing, hard, hopelessness. And from what I hear, I haven't never gone that that far. And in fact, I don't think I really ever suffered from PTSD. I would, some traumatic incidents would stay with me for a while, but it wasn't like I woke up in a cold sweat, but I knew people that it did. So it's basically his journey and how this little girl inspires him to save himself. and she kind of saves him from himself, showing, and he rescues a little girl from a school fire, and she just will not leave him alone. And she kind of gives him a reason to live, to fight for her family.
Mm.
So, it's one of those things where it's a long road, but there again, hopefully, people that read it will learn something about the fire service. And trauma isn't just unique to the fire service. Obviously, war veterans, my God, military veterans, police officers, medical, we all react to trauma differently. And
Mhm.
it affects us differently. So, and we're all different, we're all unique, and so, some people, it's gonna affect deeply, and other people not so much. I know when, with some of the stories that were shared, where we had been at the same incidents, and the firefighter sharing how it really affected him really deeply, and I'm thinking I can barely remember it. So,
Right,
it's just
right.
we're all different.
We are, yes,
What
that's
affects
so
you
true.
may not affect me.
Yeah, well, great. All right, where can people buy your books?
Okay, I mean, it's anywhere books are sold. It's it's in it's printed through Ingram. So if you go to your bookstore, I would say the best thing is to go to your local bookstore. They may not have, and they probably won't, because unless you're with the big guys, they're not going to carry.
Right.
There's just so many books out there. But ask them to order it. And in any bookstore can order it. And if you want to if you're a library reader, go to your library and ask for the books there. If someone hasn't read the first one, I strongly recommend reading the first one, because the second one is a sequel, and but it's a standalone sequel. You could read it on its own, but I think the first one is definitely the one to read first. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? So,
Right,
so
right.
yeah, I mean, through that, and obviously Amazon, and you can get it through any of the mail things. And if you want signed copies, you can get them from my website, and that's
Oh, okay.
and that would be at GLRENZ.com.
Okay. Well, that's easy,
Yep,
right?
right.
Right. Great. Well, anything else you can add or about
Well,
getting
I could just
help
add,
or
I'm currently working on my third book,
oh,
and my
fabulous.
third book is not going to be a firefighting novel. I
Okay.
am going to write the book I've really wanted to write for a long time, that takes place in Madison in 1970 during the anti-war protests. And
Oh,
this is shortly after the Kent State shootings, and campuses across the country were just embroiled in protests, and the violence was kicking up. And I thought, I was 19 in Madison in 1970,
okay.
so that whole thing kind of stuck with me. And I thought, well, that's a book that really needs to be written, and it's basically a Romeo and Juliet story of these two young people, and their groups are fighting viciously. It's bikers against anti-war protesters. And
Oh.
they fall in love, and their two groups are battling it out. Now they got to figure out how to come to terms with this and make their relationship work.
So I'm going to guess it's fiction.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Oh, yeah, definitely. Although I was a member of the CC Riders back in 1970, so I was a biker. And
Oh,
my
you
brother,
were? And
yes,
did you fall in love for a peace protester?
I did
Is
not know. That wasn't part. It's just I was around at that time, and just remember just how chaotic it was, and how people were just really, I mean, families were being torn apart with this. It's like parents were throwing their kids out because they had long hair, and they didn't believe in the war. And so,
right,
you just had all these, just so much built-in conflict. I thought, man, I should be able to write something that would resonate,
right,
especially with baby
right,
boomers. You know, this should resonate with them. And it's fun researching and going back to 1970 in Madison, and all the bars that were like on State Street, the old KK that was right on State Street, and all the different things going on there. So yeah, it's been fun kind of going back and reliving my misspent youth there.
I'm sure it'll make a very compelling story. Do you have a title figured out?
Right now, the working title is Summer of 70.
Okay,
There's books out there, the summer of 68, the summer of
right.
69.
Mhm,
I thought,
mhm.
I don't see any books that are titled Summer of 70. And the summer of 70, it's like I mean, that the summer in Madison, like I say, Kent State was the spring, and in August was the Sterling Hall bombing. So you had two major events that really changed history as far as the anti-war protests went.
Right.
And yeah, I thought, okay, at least that's where I'm starting with. Something might occur to me later, but right now that's the working title.
Good. Hey, Greg, thank you so much for being my guest. I'm hoping that it helps someone out there. And good luck with all your writing. And we'll probably see you again at another conference.
Okay, well, thank you. Just thank you for giving me a reason to get away from my writing desk for the afternoon and
Right?
talk writing.
Right. I was having some technical difficulties before, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we might not even have a show.
Oh,
So, yeah. All right. And good luck. Thank you again.
okay. It was my pleasure.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
That wraps up another show. I'd like to talk a little bit about an AI experience I had on YouTube. Actually, I had two experiences. I follow a couple of different people, and recently their images popped up with a title of a talk. I clicked on the one, and the voice was robotic. It sounded like the person, but it didn't sound like the person. I went back out, and I realized it wasn't his YouTube channel. It did say inspired by so-and-so. So I thought, what does that mean? I clicked on another person I follow, and again, the same robotic type of voice. Both of these people have dedicated YouTube channels. So when I clicked on their images, it was not their YouTube channel. So this is just a warning not to get sucked into fake news that's AI generated. I had heard also two different reports on the radio. Similar thing happened. They were both AI generated interviews of famous people, but they were fake. And one of the news reporters said, you need to go to the original source. And that was something I learned in journalism school, is go to the direct source. So when you're on YouTube, go to their YouTube channel, not some fakey thing with a fakey looking image. I know it sounds kind of stupid, but it's true. They're just trying to get you hooked. So that's all my little warning. I have some upcoming events in June. The first one will be June 7th at the Caramel Crisp gift store. It is in Oshkosh. They have the most yummy cookies and treats and lovely gifts. And they will also have authors there on that day. It's a Saturday. Come on out. And then June 21st, the Hedberg Library, it's Hedberg Library in Janesville, will be having a writers conference, but from 2 or 2:30 to 4:30, they will have a special time where authors will get to meet their fans and sell their books and sign copies for them. So come on out there too. Thank you for listening. Please comment politely, subscribe, and share. And if you see me walking around and I'm moving my lips, know that I'm talking to myself.